sessions, and on that note, and I am so lucky to be here with Salim Nourallah in his Pleasantry Lane studio in Dallas. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you, Cindy. I've been looking forward to it.
Me too. We talked about this a couple months ago, and you played the cystic fibrosis benefit last night at the Granada Theater with Rhett Miller and the O's. And so we kind of arranged this, my coming by to visit you as well. So it was really, really a nice idea.
Yeah, good piggybacking.
Definitely. And your studio is amazing. I was so surprised to drive up in this sort of residential neighborhood, little city, hip neighborhood, and then to come back in here to this very, very interesting studio that apparently a lot of love and care has been put into it.
Yeah, well, it's been my like my fort. So we just happen to make music out here.
Yeah. And so how long have you been doing things in this studio?
Well, the studio has a long history. I guess I could try to give you the Cliff Notes version, but my brother and I were in a band together for many years, and we toward at the end of the '90s, we had a lot of bad luck, a lot of missed opportunities, and we were in a situation where we really realized that unless we started recording ourselves, there was no way that we could continue making music. So we purchased this property mainly because we scoped out the garage, and it had an amazing garage. And we first thing we did after we bought it, we tore the doors off and walled it up and turned it into a rehearsal studio. And we bought a little 8-track recorder and put it in the corner. And within the year, we made a record that ended up being called Nourallah Brothers. And then we broke up. And we both separately had little mini breakdowns. He moved to Portland, and I quit playing music for about a year and a half. And what happened, we sold the place. And Western Vinyl ended up putting out the record, and it sort of gave us both a shot in the arm that we needed, and that's a whole different story, but it was sort of miraculous. And at the time, Brian Sampson, who runs the label, was actually living in Austin and heard us on the college radio station. It was a CDR that they were playing, which was remarkable, really strange. But anyway, long story short, we sold the place, and a couple of years later, after I met my wife Jamie, I was in a band called The Happiness Factor, and feeling again like I was sort of at my wit's end with music, and I really felt like I needed a bass, like I needed something. I couldn't do like the rehearsal studio thing anymore with a heavy metal band next door and a reggae band and your screaming headache, and the desperation of watching all these musicians sort of all waiting for something to happen, and usually nothing happening for anybody. So we were driving down this street, and there was a for sale sign in front of the property, and we pounced on it. We bought the property back. I'll never forget coming into the studio and seeing skis and beds and all these things, and it made me feel really sad, because this is a place that, for me, was about making music, and also my last fond memories of working with my brother. So anyway, we chucked the skis out and everything else, reclaimed it, and right before our son Gavin was born, he's 6 years old, I got the harebrained idea to tack a control room, a very small makeshift control room, not this beautiful posh control room that you see now, but a very small control room with no window. We tacked it on the studio, and I started recording bands. And the Death Ray Davies actually was the first proper record that I made here in the very small control room. And that lasted up until right before we made Blame It on Gravity by the Old 97s, which was fall of 2007. I went to Europe on my second European tour, and left Rip, who runs the studio with me here, with the daunting task of the control room conversion, which was huge. It was basically tearing down the old control room and doubling the size of the studio. and he miraculously pulled it off in a month.
Wow.
Yeah, and when I came back, I sort of helped finish up, and then the old 97s rolled in like nothing had ever happened.
Well, that was kind of convenient of you to kind of take off and leave it for
yeah,
him while you went to Europe.
It was, and it was also terribly practical, because I can't afford to shut down the studio for a month and not work. So it was one of those beautiful situations where me leaving, the studio was going to have to be shut down, and at least I was over there working.
Right.
And so we took advantage of it. So that's basically the story of the growing Pleasantry Lane.
Well, it was nice that you could reclaim the space, because it obviously has a lot of significance for you, and you've made some great things here, and so you can continue to do that.
It really does, and I think my son said something a couple of years ago about the living buildings are buildings alive or whatever, and of course we know as adults they're not. But there's something about spaces, and that spaces that we see that are alive and full of wonderful things happening, because of what we make them, and then other places that are really sad, and derelict, and like every single day that someone comes and makes music here in this building, I feel wonderful about it, because this place is so alive to me and full of all this, creativity and things that are happening. It's really a good feeling.
Well, what a great place for a kid to grow up, too, to see that kind of creativity coming and going all the time, and that his father is working on all these really cool projects.
Yeah, well, and every now and then Gavin and I get out here a lot and make some racket ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's pretty cool, too.
We had our first proper recording session about, 6 weeks ago. That was a lot of fun.
Your childhood, you grew up in El Paso.
Yeah.
And I know in a lot of your songs there's sort of this feeling of isolation in terms of lyrics. I mean, you have a lot of poppy melodies, but a lot of sort of isolation themes. And I'm assuming that comes from your years growing up in El Paso. What sort of influence did that have on you?
Oh, absolutely. Well, it was a very isolating place. Like, have you ever spent any time there? It's a very surreal place, and especially as a child, it was like I was raised in the 70s there, and it was sort of like the Arab American version of The Sopranos.
Yeah,
was
really?
my life. Yeah, there was a lot of Middle Eastern, especially Lebanese families there. So and there was sort of a vague lawlessness, like I don't know if you've heard of the Chaga family, and they're big, well-known drug dealers. Woody Harrelson's dad, they hired to assassinate a federal judge. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy things going on. And anyway, I was just this kid who sort of, with this name, which kind of stopped me from feeling normal, because it was always like an issue. And so the city, it was isolated. It was sort of cut off from the rest of America. It's in the middle of the desert on the border of Mexico. And then I felt isolated because of my heritage, the culture clashes, other things. And then I also, very early on, around 8 or 9, developed a love of mainly British rock and roll. And in El Paso, it was all about classic rock.
Right.
The radio was dominated by, heavy metal and bleeding 20-minute guitar solos and things like that. So very early on, I had this feeling like I was stranded somewhere trying to get information. It wasn't like now today, kids can just Google whatever.
Yeah,
and, you can find things at
empowering
the
right now to find your niche or find anything that interests you. I know what that's like, where you're living in a place and you feel like what's there isn't catering to you, but you can't find any other outlets.
And there were just little ways. It was like I remember there was a show on Sunday nights on one of the radio stations where the DJ Magic Mike would play a new release every week, and usually and it came on late, so you had to stay up and wait. And usually they didn't play anything good, but every now and then there'd be like a cool new record. Like I heard Neil Finn for the first time that way. And then there were these, the weird video shows like Friday Night Videos.
Yeah, I did that too.
Yeah, and there was mostly crap, but then I saw Elvis Costello on Friday night videos for the first time.
Yeah, I remember just like staying up late just to
Yeah.
all the way to the end of that show just to see if something interesting was
Yeah.
happening on there. Yeah.
And Saturday Night Live
Yeah.
was the same way for me. Like, I saw so many great bands for the first time
Definitely.
that way.